for the fantasy football season. And here's a few running backs I will bench this week. The first guy, Clyde EdwardsHelaire, City Chiefs. Clyde EdwardsHelaire, so far so good in the early going, but it's around dependable numbers here for EdwardsHelaire. Week 1 at Arizona, 7 carries, 42 rush yards, 3 catches, 32 yards, and the 2 touchdowns bailed them out. Week 2 versus the Chargers, 8 carries, 74 yards, big yards per carry, with 4 catches, 44 yards. And then week 3 at Indianapolis, 7 carries, no rushing yards, but he did find an end zone on a goal line touchdown, and 5 catches for 39 yards. So right here, it's tough to trust EdwardsHelaire. We've seen Jerry McKinnon pretty much get the same amount of snaps as EdwardsHelaire, or even more. Like in week 3, he had more snaps played than EdwardsHelaire. And EdwardsHelaire, he's not rushing many rush attempts. 7-8 attempts a game it's been for him. We know he's a decent receiver out of the backfield, but right here on Sunday Night Football, a very tough matchup at a Tampa Bay Buc team that pretty much shuts down the run, and running backs have had a tough time against. So if you got better options at the running back position with this tough matchup for EdwardsHelaire, and just the workload in general here, where he's been touchdown dependable, he's an easy running back to shy away from this week and bench. The next guy is Antonio Gibson of the Washington Commanders. So Antonio Gibson, a lot of people, they haven't liked using him so far in fantasy football, even though he's been serviceable as a number 2 running back to flex option the first 3 weeks of the season in PPR leagues. Week 1 versus Jacksonville, 58 rush yards, 7 catches, 72 yards. That saved his day. Week 2 at Detroit, 28 rush yards, a touchdown, 2 catches, 13 yards. And week 3 versus Philly, 12 carries, 38 yards, a touchdown, a catch for 2 yards. So the last 2 weeks, he's another touchdown dependable guy, which has salvaged his fantasy day. Because if he don't get those touchdowns in week 2 and week 3, he's finishing with 5 or 6 fantasy points in those weeks here. So week 4, tough matchup at the Dallas Cowboys. I know Saquon Barkley had a big game, but most of his damage was on that big 40-plus yard run for the end zone. So right here, this Dallas D-line, they're playing tough this season. They're getting to the quarterback, and they're stopping running backs. Week 1, I know Leonard Fournette went over 100 yards, but it was a tough 100 he had to get in that ball game. And then week 2, Joe Mixon, he didn't do much in that ball game. And then week 3, if Barkley didn't have that explosive run, the Cowboys kept them at bay. So right here with a weak offensive line guarding here for Antonio Gibson. And Washington, not really liking him, but have no choice but to start him at running back. He's a guy I would bench this week. The next guy is Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So a lot of people coming into the season, and I mentioned this in my preseason videos, as Etienne is the guy that a lot of people would jump in the gun, and I would avoid where his ADP was going, 3rd or 4th round. So right now, James Robinson's gone nowhere. He's been a great running back so far in the first 3 weeks of the season. And Trevor Lawrence, he looks so much comfortable, like a different quarterback in the first 3 weeks under Doug Peterson than what he did with Urban Meyer last year. So Travis Etienne, week 1 at Washington, 4 carries, 47 yards, 2 catches, 18 yards. Week 2 versus Indianapolis, 9 carries, 20 yards, 3 catches, 33 yards. And week 3 at the Chargers, he did have a big workload, but a lot of garbage time in that ball game, believe it or not, where they were up 31-10 most of that game in the second half was Jacksonville. So he had 13 carries, 45 yards, but only 3 catches, 30 yards. So right here, week 4, tough matchup at Philadelphia. And if Jacksonville wants to win this ball game and stay in this ball game, they're going to have to run the football in between the tackles. I think we're going to see a lot of James Robinson touches in this one. And Trevor Lawrence, he's going to have to be smart with the football, even though he's got a decent arsenal of weapons this year. Marvin Jones is still there. Christian Kirk, what a pickup he's been. A guy I thought wouldn't be good coming into the season, but he's proved me wrong so far, no doubt about it. And Zay Jones has been a solid number 3 receiver there. And Evan Ingram as a decent tight end, but right here, with all those options in a tough matchup where I think they're going to run it between the tackles more with a more physical back in Robinson. This week, Travis Etienne is a bench. The next running back is Jeff Wilson Jr. of the San Francisco 49ers. So far, Wilson Jr. has been serviceable after Elijah Mitchell went down in week 1 with his knee injury, and he's out another 5-6 weeks here. Wilson, week 2 in Seattle in his start, 18 carries, 84 yards, 2 catches, 19 yards. And week 3 at Denver, I just thought he didn't get a lot of opportunities in a ball game that was tightly contested the whole game, where it was 7-3 most of this game here. And then the Broncos pulled it out in the 4th quarter, 12 carries, 75 yards, 3 catches, 31 yards, and a fumble loss, which ended the ball game for the San Francisco 49ers. I want to see more of a workload here for Jeff Wilson Jr. I know Deebo Samuel, They use him as a running back at times as well. But Mason and Marlon Mack, they rarely saw the field in this game, so I want to see more of them. And that's what they're going to have to do, San Francisco. Jimmy Garoppolo, he's not up to snuff yet. We're barely having a training camp coming off the shoulder injury. But right here in Week 4, it's not a great matchup for Jeff Wilson versus a tough Los Angeles Ram front line. And he's a running back I will bench this week. And the fifth and final running back I will bench is Ramon Stevenson of the New England Patriots. So Stevenson, he's getting more work of late here for this Patriot team, and it's pretty much a 50-50 split back there in New England. And he came off a monster game, no doubt about it, versus Baltimore. But this Green Bay Packer team, we saw down for that in that Week 3 matchup. I know Week 2, Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery had nice ball games, but right here, this offensive line isn't great over there in New England. Mac Jones is going to be out in this one. If Brian Hoyer is starting, if I'm the Packers defense, I'm stopping the run and making Hoyer try to beat me, and I think that's going to be the game plan in Green Bay. And plus the game script, if Green Bay gets off to a 10-14 point lead, they're going to shy away from the run. And Stevenson, he's not a receiver really out of the backfield, even though we saw him have 4 catches, 28 yards in the Week 3 matchup. So right here, tough matchup for New England. Offensive line isn't great. Mac Jones is hurt. Brian Hoyer, he's a veteran, I know that, but what does he really have left in the tank? And this Packer front line's a solid unit. So right here, that's a few running backs I will bench for Week 4 of the fantasy football season.